Hi guys, Miss Chris here from the Fountaindale Library. Today we're going to paint a black cat sitting on a pumpkin. We're going to use watercolors, and I'm going to show you two different kinds of watercolors. We're all used to the watercolors that come in a little palette, and I really like these. These are easy, they're transportable, super simple. So we're going to use those. But I also wanted to share with you the tubes of watercolor. They work really well. You have a lot more variety of colors sometimes, and they work the same way. Once you put them into your palette, if they dry out, you just reactivate them with water. So we're going to look at that, two different types of paint, and also some different ways that we can use watercolors. If we pull the color, whether we're using a brush to do that or a tissue, we pull the color, we can give some depth to our painting. So I'm going to show you some very simple techniques you can use to make your watercolors look extra special. Okay, so first we're going to start with a sketch because it's always a good idea for your placement. You can just go straight in and start painting. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's always a good idea. And for me, I want to make sure my pumpkin is placed where I want it to be, kind of centered. Very light sketch because you don't want it to show up under your paints. Now, once a painting is dry, you can go in with an eraser. If you leave some sketching, you can go in there and get rid of it. But the later you do it, you don't have to worry about that. Now, I also want to start my cat a little bit so I know where he's at. Also, then I can go in and I can do my background and not worry. See, there's a lot different when we use acrylics. We can paint our whole background and we can paint over it. It's a little trickier when you're working with watercolors. So let's make him, what did I do here? Did I give him too many, let's see here, here's his little face. All right. It's different. I'm trying to sketch on camera so that you guys can see. If I were sketching at home, I'd just have this in my lap. And it's not so easy to do. So he might have a little bit bigger ears than a cat would normally have, but that's okay. He'll still look very cool. Okay, so here's our little cat. Now, I'm going to grab a little bit of an eraser because I want to make sure that it's not too dark because I kind of made it a little dark, but I still want to see. So just take a little bit off. You just want to see where everything's going to be. Because the next step we're going to do, we're going to paint our background. Now I know normally we don't paint the background first, but in this case, I'm going to try, this way we have a nice smooth background. Now we normally use these, and these are great. If you have these at home, use them. But I'm going to show you a little bit with this. So the black is going to be in our first spot. And it just comes out just like acrylics, but it is not acrylics. If it dries, you can reactivate it. So we got black, and we've got orange for our pumpkin. And got a little bit of blue. Now this is a darker blue that I might use. So maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll use a little bit of both. Maybe we'll use some of our paints and then green. Green is what we want. So, okay, now we've got our water. Always a good idea to have two, even more if you want, but at least two cups of water. One that's going to always stay clean because you'll want that for the water that you're going to use to prime your paper with. And I'll show you that. And then this will be the one that'll clean your brushes, and always have a paper towel or some tissues with you as well. All right, let's get rid of this paper. And let's get started on our background. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clean water, and I'm going to paint with the water, just with the water. Don't paint your cat, and don't paint your pumpkin. Just paint around, and you're going to see it get nice and shiny. Don't worry if you miss some, but you want to get it as close as you can to all wet, because this is going to help everything spread, and it's going to help everything not go all the way into your cat. Now you'll want to make sure you try not to get his little ears, And then you come down, go around the pumpkin. And you can use any kind of brush, but I like one that has a little tip, especially if I've got something I've drawn in there. Then I can get in those corners a little bit. And hopefully on video you can see how nice and shiny it is. Now the first ones I painted aren't quite as shiny anymore, so I'm kind of coming through, just adding a tiny bit more, so then we can start. Now for a background, I am going to use this big brush too. So this brush is now going to get a little dirty. We're going to start with kind of our horizon. Let me add a little bit more here. Do a little bit. We're going to have green for our grass. So we're going to just drop a little water in with this paint. And you'll see, just like the palette over there, you'll get a nice color with this. So then we're going to come along. Now, I actually left it pretty wet. Maybe I should have left it a little less wet, because it's spreading a little more than I want it to. So maybe we'll let it dry a little bit. But you'll see how it's going. And it's going to spread in there. And it gives a nice, what's the word I'm looking for? A nice feel. Now, you see there's a lot of water over here. We're going to clean that up a little bit because we don't want it to spread all over the place. We just want a green grass around our pumpkin. All right, and that'll spread out a little more than we want. Okay. It is difficult. All right, so we're going to take our paper towel. And just even along the tape, you want to make sure, because you don't want that to slide back into your picture. Now, you don't want too much, because that's a lifting technique, a whole other lifting technique, which works really well. But we want that green to stay on there. So now I've cleaned my brush. I'm going to use my paper towel and make sure it runs pretty clear. Now, blue and green are similar colors, so it's not, you don't have to worry too much. But if you're using very different colors, you'll definitely want to make sure that you clean your brush well. Now, let's start a lot darker at the top because I want this to be almost a nighttime scene. So my top across, it's going to be pretty dark. And then as we move down, I'm going to add a little more water, clean my brush a little bit, but not add more paint. Yeah, that blue is pretty dark, isn't it? It's a lot darker than what's in there, so which is kind of nice. So if we come down, we're almost dragging it down. We should get a little lighter as we get to here. And then again, careful. Now the other thing, this is a nice first one to start with because the black should cover the blue. If you end up getting a little blue on your cat, it'll be okay. All right, that's not too bad. And of course, you're at home, not trying to make sure it's in front of the camera, so you'll be able to have it a little more nice and neat. Now, I'm getting in these corners. My brush is getting a little bit spread out, and that makes it a little hard. So I'm going to grab one of my tiny brushes. It's a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go a little and try to spread this a little bit so that I'm not too much. You can always change brushes, especially with watercolor. They come clean nicely. All right. I'm going to grab a little more paint and we'll finish up this here. And what I like about watercolor too, you get a lot of almost the variation in color is what the sky would be. It's not going to look all one color blue. And maybe we need a little more dark here. Just add color where you think you need it. And once you're done, you can still, you don't want to overdo it because then your paper starts to peel. But you can always add more colors in if you think you need it. I think that looks pretty good so far. I'm going to take some of this off the the sides so that it doesn't bleed into our painting, just so. All right, so it's looking good so far. Now, one thing I forgot to draw is the cat's tail. So I'm gonna do that right now and just, almost like an upside down question mark, let's say here. And kind of his swirly tail, just like a J. And then toward the end, you might wanna come in, just like a real cat's tail. If you have a cat at home, you can look how they're sitting on the edge of the couch or something and see how their tail looks, but that's about right. All right, so now we're going to start with our pumpkin because the pumpkin has got the orange. And again, similar to acrylics, not quite the same because they do blend. The black, once we have the black on, you can't cover the black, but you can cover the orange a little bit. So I'm gonna add just a little bit. This one, I don't want to be too, I want that color to be bright, but I am gonna prime it just a little bit with some of our fresh water, just so that it takes very well. Not a lot, just a little. Just a little. And I'm gonna use this smaller brush so I can get more of the detail in there. But whatever you have at home, you might even have a bigger paper, and then you'll have more room. So, and then I like to let it actually dry a little bit. You still want some of that water on there. All right, so now we're gonna drop some water, some of the fresh water, into this orange. Let's get that going. All right. Now, I'm gonna take and just come along the side, and the tip, the top is gonna be a little darker. Now, don't worry about our little lines that we're gonna add because we will add those with that pulling technique a little bit that I'm gonna show you. So, try not to paint your tail or your cat. So as we finish our pumpkin, we're gonna add a little more paint on here. And then actually we're gonna draw some of it up, but we want the dark around here. So let's see, that's good. Now, I'm going to clean this brush off and I'm gonna bring in this little guy. This is nice. So I'm gonna show you a little technique. You can use a paper towel to pull paint out with watercolor. We've done that before, and sometimes it makes a very good, very cool effect. But for something like this where you want the lines, you can use your fresh water, and I take a little bit of it off. I don't know if you can see that. I hope you can see that. So I take a little bit off, and then you're gonna kind of paint your line with the water and pull it off, and then use your towel to take that off. And you see how it's pulling the paint out of the pumpkin, and we're getting this cool line up. And that's kind of what I want. I want the inner part of the pumpkin to have some depth and get it a little lighter. It's really tricky. With acrylics, you just add more paint. You'd add some white or some yellow to give it that. With watercolors, it's a little different. You can, let's see here, you can, let's take some of that off. You can leave it white and then try for the lighter colors. I think I feel like this gives you a little more control because you're pulling it back off. But try both, see what you like. This one takes a little more time, so we're gonna play with this for a few minutes. Okay, it's not as neat as I might like, but you get the idea. So by pulling that, you're giving that pumpkin a more realistic look and those lines that you see. And it also gives it that kind of curve that you want. All right, so next, we got to paint our cat. So since I've already wet this brush, I'm going to use it for our cat because it's a little smaller and it's got a nice little tip. So I'm going to add some water to our black. Well, this is where you do want to be a little careful because the black is a lot less forgiving. But as you can see with the way we pulled that paint off, it's not impossible to clean up a mistake. So just kind of come around and gently and carefully paint in your tail. We're going to go back through again with some of that lifting technique to give it some variation in color. Okay, so now we got it pretty well covered. I'm going to clean my brush pretty well and get a lot of that black off. If you have extra brushes, you can also just use another brush. But if you only have the one brush, just clean it nice and get it nice and clean. And then what I like to do is just make some like little curve, pull some of that color off. And with the black, it's a little harder, but you'll see it start to come off. And it'll give it the feel of fur, a little bit. Now, a little awkward to see here, so I hope you can see it better than I can see. And just pull some of the paint off and leave some of it dark. I'm actually going to pull some of this paint into here. But you can see how that works. And if you end up pulling too much out, just pull some more paint in, like I did here. I don't want too much lines. So I could do a lot more, but then you would just be sitting watching me paint. And the last but not least, I forgot to make his whiskers. So we're gonna take a little bit of black, really light. I'm gonna test to make sure, yeah, we don't want too much, because then it'll just get messy. and just give him some whiskers. And that's a simple watercolor cat on a pumpkin. You can also add, some green leaves on the bottom. You can add a moon like I did in this one. Make it your own. Add whatever you like, but try these techniques. I think you'll find they make your watercolor paintings really pop. Thanks for coming.